I'm going to welcome everybody to the August Safe Routes to School call. We have what we hope is an upgrade, which is waiting music for you all as we're all arriving here. Some walking and biking themed music for you all to enjoy. So, yeah, how's everybody doing this morning? Hey, Jill, it looks like you're in the office.
It is true. I am in Egan, back, but it's literally just me in a sea of cubes.
Not dystopian at all.
Not a little Ray Bradbury, you know, something. Anyone familiar? What was it, like the kids trapped in a mall? I don't know.
Cool.
And I don't know if folks heard this, but it's still online. This week, Angela Davis on Minnesota Public Radio for her show had an episode about biking. And there was one person from Minneapolis Public Schools, if I'm remembering right, who was great. And then Alyssa Shuffman, whoop, whoop, whoop. And she did an excellent job talking about biking and never at once sounded wonky, which is often our kryptonite.
Well, thanks, Jill. Yeah, it was Dwayne in his part of St. Paul Public Schools.
St. Paul Public. I blend them all together. Sorry.
Bike fleet stuff and safe routes for like 30 years. So, you know, hopefully we'll see him on a future call. It'd be really fun. So, cool. Well, it seems like folks have stopped the trickle in. So I will go ahead and get us started this morning so that we can end on time and enjoy some sunshine. I'm not going to have my video on this morning because I've been having some internet issues, and Dave has kindly agreed to step in if I suddenly freeze. So if that happens, thanks to Dave, and apologies in advance. Welcome, everybody. That is not the correct date. It is August 4th. Welcome to the August 4th Safe Routes to School call. Very excited to have you all here. What is the Safe Routes to School Network? The Minnesota Safe Routes to School Network is a couple hundred. You're all very dedicated professionals from organizations and agencies working on safe routes to school in Minnesota. Together, we are building skills in communities to implement safe routes to school. We're supporting partnerships between state and local agencies, municipalities, advocacy organizations, and we are working for those policy changes that support walking and bicycling to schools and improvements to the environments around our schools. Together, we are making Minnesota a state where all students, no matter their race, ethnicity, income level, age, ability, or location, can walk and bike on routes that are safe, comfortable, and convenient. So that's what we are all doing here today. I'm very excited for our August meeting that we are going to be talking about Walk to School Day already and some walking things. So we're doing welcome and introductions right now. Sam Rockwell, my colleague at Move Minnesota, is going to give us a very brief update on the statewide multimodal transportation plan, which is relevant to all of the work that we do all the time. We are all multimodal. Then we're going to hear from Maria Wardoku over at Alta Planning to share about the inclusive walk audits guide. And then we're going to hear about Walk to School Day from Catherine. I think you go by Katie, but we'll do some breakout discussions, and then we'll hear about the great conversations we're having in breakouts before we close out. With that, I will turn it over to Sam for a 5-minute update. Sam, do you have slides you want to share, or you just want to talk?
I'm just going to talk, and then I'm going to drop a link in the chat at the end, so you listen and then look. Alyssa's note that a very short update was directed at me to keep me on time, just noting that. So I'm going to talk briefly about the SMTP and what it is, and kind of how it applies to safe routes and what you can do about it. So SMTP stands for the Statewide Multimodal Transportation Plan, which is a required plan under Minnesota state statute to be drafted by MnDOT. And it is drafted every 5 years, and it is a 20-year plan. So every 5 years, 20-year plan. And why is it important? Well, it is the guiding policy document for transportation in the state of Minnesota, not just for MnDOT, although it can kind of only hold absolutely MnDOT accountable, but it is the statewide transportation policy plan. And the policy plan then flows into another document, which will be open for comment in just a couple months, called MNSHIP, which is the Minnesota State Highway Improvement Program. And that is the budget document. So it's an accompanying budget document. And just to put a little bit of a scale on this, the policies in SMTP guide the spending of that MNSHIP those MNSHIP dollars, planned dollars, and the kind of ballpark amount of money that will be in MNSHIP is $28 billion. So it's a lot of money, and it's important. And it's important we get the policy document right, because it's going to guide how all that money flows. So 20-year plan. Yes, it also ties into and is required to be referenced in what's called the STIP, which is a policy document that MnDOT puts together, policy and funding document that MnDOT puts together, that is the basis for our request for federal funds. So as you think about all of that federal infrastructure money that we've been reading about in the newspapers, this helps guide what we can do there. So the focus of the SMTP, now they have some cross-cutting focus areas from aging infrastructure to climate, economy and employment, equity, safety, and transportation options. And those then flow into a series of objectives. So the plan is 333 pages long, but you, when commenting on the plan, did not have to look at all of that. Really the most relevant part for us, and we can send out these details afterward, is chapter 5. So chapter 5 is the objectives, the section that deals with kind of those policy objectives. And those include open decision-making, transportation safety, system stewardship, climate action, critical connections, and healthy and equitable communities. And within each of those objectives, I'll talk a little bit how effective commenting can work. Within each of those objectives, there are performance measures and metrics. So there's kind of a grid that gives you the performance measures for achieving the goals in that objective section, and metrics for what it means to achieve those goals. And then there are strategies and actions that follow each of those. And so what to look for. So for example, the critical connections objective, there are some performance measures like job accessibility by bicycle, car, and transit. And performance, and what they have as the metric is increasing, right? And so that's vague, right? Increasing doesn't actually hold MnDOT or the state of Minnesota to anything. So as we're looking through this document, as you're looking through this document, look for those kinds of words that are vague and think about whether that is sufficient. So is it sufficient to increase our accessibility to destinations by bike, walk, transit, or should we be pushing for something more than that? When you're looking at those, the strategies and actions, again, look for strategies and actions that are actually holding MnDOT and the state of Minnesota to account. So words like implement rather than words like explore. And so as you're going through that chapter 5, and I saw that Dave put that in there, keep an eye out for those kind of words. Move Minnesota will be putting out, and I know that other advocacy organizations will be putting out some of our own comments in the next week or so. Comments are open in, not week or so, a month or so. Comments are open through September 18th, and I'm putting the place to go to access the comments in the chat right here. I will note that one of the things that is in the SMTP, which is a big change, is a target for reducing vehicle miles traveled, which is our single occupancy vehicle driving rate in the state of Minnesota, which is a big deal, and many of the comments will be focused on that as well. Please feel free to reach out to me. I'm at Move Minnesota. I'm on the policy advisory team for the SMTP at MnDOT, and so I'm reasonably familiar with the plan and happy to help folks think through it. That was reasonably succinct.
Thanks, Sam. So, just trying to kind of distill down a lot of what you said, right? So this is not about necessarily, there's a chapter in here that says, here's what we're going to do with safe routes as a state, but this is more about the ecosystem Safe Routes is operating in and making sure that the ecosystem is really supporting walking and biking as a priority in a way that will lift up all the work that all of you are doing on safe routes day after day. Does that feel like a fair sort of summary of why this is important?
Yes, this is about that full ecosystem. It's about the funding that's available. And it's about how the state priorities reflect or don't reflect what we're trying to do here at Safe Routes.
Thanks. Anyone else have any other immediate questions? And thanks to Dave for putting that link in the chat. All right, I don't see any raised hands or folks jumping in the chat. So Sam, I want to thank you for sharing that timely update. We'll look forward to sharing out some additional links in the follow-up email from the call so that folks have those handy with some notes. And thanks again for helping us understand how this very, as Jill described at the top of the call, wonky set of policy documents relates to the day-to-day of just wanting kids to be able to walk and bike to school safely. With that, I will move on to the next agenda item. I'm very excited to welcome Maria to talk about inclusive walk audits.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Can you see my PowerPoint? Awesome. So I'm Maria Wardoku, so nice to see many friendly faces. I work for Alta Planning and Design, and we were hired by the Minnesota Department of Health to help them improve pedestrian planning so that it's more inclusive of people with disabilities. So one of the things that we have done is to develop an inclusive walk audit guide that I think has some recommendations, resources, and tools that could help you in your safe routes to school work. So I'm just going to take, I think, about 10 minutes. If that's still a good amount of time, I will just take 10 minutes and share what we have. Okay. So what I'm hoping you'll get out of this quick presentation is that you'll learn more about inclusive engagement, inclusive of people with disabilities, and you'll learn about this inclusive walk audit facilitator's guide and how it was developed. I'll kind of walk you through what's in there. This is a link to the inclusive walk audit guide that you can find online, and we can share that following the presentation. All right, so the guide's purpose: improve pedestrian planning processes by making them more inclusive of people with disabilities. I want to define 3 key terms. The first is walking. So when we say walking, we are using it as an inclusive term that includes both ambulatory and non-ambulatory modes. So that means walking encompasses all forms of mobility devices, including using a wheelchair, a cane, a walker, or any other mobility device that's going to let someone travel at a human speed. Okay, building on that, what is a walk audit? So this guide is focused on walk audits, and they are an activity where people evaluate the walking environment and they identify issues that impact their comfort and safety. And a walk audit can be used as a community engagement tool. You might also hear it referred to as a walking tour. Okay, so walk audit, our last term is disability. We are defining disability as a physical or mental condition that may limit or alter one or major life activities for a person. Disabilities may be temporary or permanent, and people may have multiple disabilities. Disability encompasses differences or limitations to vision, hearing, speech, mobility, cognition, and more. So those are the kind of working definitions that are key to this guide. How did we develop the guide? We convened a group of people with disabilities, and across that whole spectrum of what we just talked about, what disability can mean. So people had multiple disabilities, or they had cognition disabilities, vision. It was really across the whole spectrum. So we convened them twice during our project to try out engagement techniques. We had one meeting where we took them through basically a mock walk audit and got their feedback then on how that worked and what was comfortable, what was uncomfortable. And honestly, there was a lot we needed to change. There was a lot that was uncomfortable for people with disabilities about the way that we were doing walk audits. So we took that feedback and started drafting this guide and used this newfound guidance to bring that group back together again and do another mock walk audit. So doing it with their feedback in mind and then seeing, does this work? And that allowed us to further refine the walk audit guidance because we got it, I guess, a lot closer to being accessible and welcoming for people with disabilities, but not all the way. So we got a little bit more feedback and incorporated that into the guide. So we've had a couple of these kind of circular revision processes to try and get the guidance to match up with what we heard from people with disabilities. So that's where the information comes from. What's actually in the guide? So it includes two main sections. The first is planning a more inclusive meeting. And I think what's in there is pretty relevant to almost any kind of meeting that you would have with members of the public. And the second part is conducting a more inclusive walk audits. That's more narrowly focused on the walk audit tool. There's also an appendix that has some useful tools that you could use to host your own walk audit. You can use to support more inclusive meetings. And I want to highlight some of the recommendations and resources that you can find in the guide. And I'm gonna try to highlight one item per slide to not overwhelm you too much. But you can definitely go back into the guide and see the full array of recommendations for running a more inclusive meeting and walk audit. So types of walk audits that we talk about in the guide. In-person walk audits, ideally where you have invited people with disabilities to attend. So that's usually in a group. You walk maybe a mile is typically a good distance to cover in an hour. You could do an in-person walk audit and bring some mobility simulation devices. So a wheelchair, low vision goggles are something that we've used to help people maybe who don't have disabilities or who want to experience the environment in a little bit of a different way. It really, for me, really eye-opening to like use a wheelchair and actually try to go up a ramp and experience what it's like when that slope of the sidewalk is too steep. The third kind of walk audit is independent and virtual walk audits, and I'm going to touch on that at the end. Okay, so just highlighting a few tips for planning a more inclusive meeting. So contacting disability services and advocacy organizations early on. Let them know, for example, that you're doing a safe routes planning process. So that really helps to set up the whole experience to be more accessible. Like what locations feel comfortable for people? What times of day are good? So starting there with planning a more inclusive meeting and facilitation, thinking about facilitation before your meeting. What we found with our group, our working group who informed this guide, is that the facilitation really is starting before the meeting, much earlier than we normally think about that. So it's in setting clear meeting expectations, really letting people know what is this meeting about, what can they expect. Can be very helpful, especially for people who have different ways of understanding information or cognitive impairments. Really helpful to think of the facilitation as starting before the meeting and being really clear about what's going to happen. during a meeting, I want to highlight that setting shared agreements was really important. Especially if you're bringing people together who are have different levels of maybe experience in what you're doing, or different levels of comfort in a meeting environment. It can be helpful to make explicit how you expect people to behave. One thing that I like to do in a lot of meetings is the step up, step back rule, and encourage people to be just monitoring how much space they're taking up, pushing themselves if they're not speaking up enough, reining it in a little bit if they're kind of dominating the conversation. And that's not intuitive to some people who maybe rarely are in meetings. What I want to highlight in facilitation before a walk audit, so when you're preparing the group to go out, is offering multiple ways to share ideas. That was super important to our working group participants. We had worksheets where people could just write what they thought. We had time for verbal feedback while we were on the walk audit and afterwards. We also got some feedback non-verbally by, for example, saying on a scale of 1 to 5, how comfortable are you feeling in this environment? And then people could just use their hand and kind of signal to us how they felt. So having a really wide variety of ways for people to share input was key to making the environment feel comfortable for people with an array of disabilities.
And I'm going to time check you on 2 minutes, Maria.
Okay, cool. I am almost done. So I'll point out one last thing for facilitation during a walk audit. So while you're on the walk, we found it was important to stick to the planned route and the stops. Consistency and predictability was really important for our working group. So, on our first walk, it was cold and we're like, well, maybe let's cut it short. Let's go down the street instead. And that really threw people off. So I learned, to stick to the plan, and that will really help people navigate the walk audit. Last thing I'll show you is this virtual walk audit example. We did this in Bemidji, and I'm just going to pull up. So we offered people the opportunity to do an independent walk audit, where they printed out a sheet of paper and they walked with it by themselves or with their family along the walking route, and let us know how that route felt. And then we also offered this virtual experience. We took video walking along the route. So people can click on the street, watch the video, and then fill out a quick survey. How comfortable did they feel? What made them feel comfortable or uncomfortable? And that was a great way to get participation, especially with COVID. So that's just a quick taste of what all you can find in that walk audit guide. And I'll note that we are producing version 2.0 and updating that guide with a racial equity lens. So be on the lookout for that. And that is all I have. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Maria. What a cool resource. I feel like I learned a lot and I'm very excited to dig into the guide a little bit more. I don't see any questions in the chat, but if other folks have questions, feel free to put them in the chat real quick. One question that came to mind for me immediately, Maria, was that was that a Google My Maps tool? How did you do that sort of virtual embedded map that you showed us right there at the end? That seems technologically complicated.
It was surprisingly simple. We did use Google My Maps. That was just a free tool. We took a video using a GoPro, but you could just use a phone. Uploaded the videos to YouTube, and then we're able to really, really easily link them to the map. So it was way quicker than I expected it would be.
Very cool. Not a thing that often happens with technology. I see Dave asking in the chat, any thoughts on how folks might use this with the beginning of the school in communities that are interested in safe routes to school, or thinking about relating it to Walk to School Day?
Yeah, I think that you could definitely make use, especially of the planning and inclusive meeting section, and think about that for any meetings you're conducting to like get people involved. How can you connect with students or parents who have disabilities? I think that really shapes the conversation right from the beginning. Like not everybody's thinking about disability, but once they're walking the route with somebody who has a disability, or they're using a wheelchair or simulation device, it really changes people's perspectives. So I just say maybe start with thinking about how you can connect with some people who have disabilities as you're beginning this school year. And we have a couple resources also in the guide for like where you might find disability related organizations.
Awesome. Thanks, Maria. And I think, I guess I'll just close this presentation with a thought that I've heard a lot from disability advocates, which is often that when you make things better for people with disabilities, you make things better for everybody. It tends to be a more inclusive experience for everybody. So certainly I'm excited about the lessons that you have learned that folks can continue to learn from here. So thanks for joining us, Maria. If folks have other questions, feel free to drop them in the chat and we can chat as we go.
Absolutely.
With that, so next up on our agenda is to talk about Walk to School Day in Condon Park, and I am trying to look through our list of people and make sure that the person I'm going to call on is here. I don't know, I can't see the whole list of folks. Dave, can you see the whole list of folks?
I could if I wasn't typing in the chat. Let me take a look here. I'm not seeing Kate on here. Julie, did you hear confirmation from her?
I didn't, but Alyssa.
Yeah, she confirmed that she was going to be here. So
Okay.
I wonder if something went wrong this morning. That's such a bummer way to start the day for her. We'll just have a transparent facilitator moment and check in with my folks, Dave and Julie. Dave and Julie, do you want to do some informal conversation about Walk to School Day before we jump into breakouts, or do we think we want to just kind of jump into breakouts now and have a little bit more time? I know last time feedback we got was there wasn't enough time in breakout groups. We really could use small discussions.
Breakout groups are set up to go, so if we want to jump into them, that works. Otherwise, Dave, what do you think?
Maybe we can lay the framework here before we head into the breakout groups. And that was that, when we were talking about the topics for August and what we might be discussing here, it was to try and bring up some of the tools and some of the ideas or process that some folks are going through to not just hold a Walk to School Day event, but really leverage that Walk to School Day event to, support other safe routes to school work throughout the remainder of the school year, whether that's having something kind of with a big enough bang that, local electeds are showing up, or that you're able to draw in more of the safe routes to school team, or if it's a chance to hold an inclusive walk audit leading up to it, or as a part of it, as people are thinking about or focused on the topic of walking to school. And we know that, just looking down the list of people that are on here, Alyssa, 90% of this call is held a Walk to School Day and probably has all kinds of great ideas for how to achieve exactly that. So we could, either ask if folks want to talk about what they're doing in the main group and then break into smaller groups, or we could do that in the smaller groups as well. What do you think?
I see Jill keeps coming off mute. I'm trying not to talk.
Well, I actually meant to turn my video back on and I accidentally unmuted. I think we could do that. I don't, or I'm wondering if anybody impromptu with past experience would want to just share a high level, like what they've gotten out of Walk to School Day, how they've gotten into planning it. But I also think we can just go into groups. I'm a leaf on the water.
I think that would be more fun to talk about in small groups and then be able to share about that with a large group. So, you know, I think if Julie, you're ready, let's jump into breakout groups and have some conversation about what people have done for Walk to School Day, and then share that wisdom when we all come back.
Great. Facilitators, you got an email with the breakout questions as a reminder. So those are ready for you. Alyssa, what time would you like us to reconvene?
Let's come back 10:50.
Okay, great. I will put a 1-minute warning into the groups, but otherwise, I will open the rooms. Here we go. Hopefully you guys can hear the music. We're just waiting for other folks to come back in. We're just trying to spice it up a little bit with bicycle related music.
Welcome back, everybody, as folks are getting settled. I hope you all had as good a discussion in your breakouts as we did in ours. We went on a couple of really great tangents. Yeah, I think one of the things we talked about, I guess my sort of takeaway was this really interesting thread across some of the conversations where folks were both thinking of Walk to School Day, right, as the culmination of a lot of work that happens at the beginning of the school year, but also a really important jumping off point for all the rest of the work around walking and biking that continues to happen throughout the school year. And I think there's like this way it gets so easy to get caught up in like the eventness of it all, to think of it as like the end of something, but it's also the beginning of something. And to see that just like reflected in all the different observations in our group was very cool. You all are doing great work. Jill, what went on in your breakout room?
Awesomeness is what went on in my breakout room. So things that kind of surfaced were talking about that, like, we reframed the question a little bit of like, do you get excited when you hear Walk to School Day? Do you get like nervous? And it's both. And there was a lot of experience in our discussion, and I think acknowledging that challenge of, you always talk about finding your champion, and that when you've been at this work long enough, you like have turnover in champion, and the impact of COVID and that kind of fatigue. So both like, yes, it's a useful event, and we're a little tired. So I think that's real. So we were talking about like just how to like shore yourself up, and then also pivoted to discussing a little bit about the inclusive walk audit guide, and it was kind of acknowledging how much the walk audit guide has evolved from times back, 2016 or 17, and then also kind of noting the opportunity to always thinking about all different users. And there was a practical point that Jeremy got cut off on, but just a question about like noting air quality, and for folks with like a chronic lung condition, that you would want to be mindful not having that walk audit on that day. And so thinking about some of these summer days when that really shows up. So that was just like a practical note, and important. So yeah, it was a good discussion and went really fast.
Same. Air quality and idling also came up in our conversation. Angela, what did you all talk about?
Yeah, hi everybody. So similar to what Jill mentioned, we talked a little bit about the impact of COVID and how that's created some barriers for reaching people and engagement, especially now that as COVID starts to retreat in our rearview mirror, schools and people's capacity are really just building back up. And to be real, we didn't talk about this, but it's just occurring to me now in the spirit of kind of this accessibility audit. I really think the pandemic has had an indelible effect on everyone's capacities. So I think that's also important to recognize when we're trying to engage and get people to do things. There was a lot of excitement about the accessible walking audit guide, just in terms of who we can share that with, who might be interested in seeing it. At Bikeman, that's something we could definitely point schools to when they're thinking about how to, improve some of their walking programming. Sharing it with some higher level, city planners or master planners, getting stuff in the door of the people who can do the work. And then also that, let's see, let me look back to my notes. What else? Just a lot of energy about doing that. And just thinking about oh, there are places that the virtual walking audit might be really helpful to do. Somebody mentioned oh, this tangentially also reminds me that there are perceptions of safety in certain areas, and could we do some kind of Will had the great idea of maybe I put a GoPro on and I walk around a neighborhood that seems unsafe, but actually show you can visit this park, you can do this. And I was yeah, that's such a cool idea. You could do that with walking, biking, or rolling. So just a lot of energy kind of created from that guide. So thanks for sharing that resource.
That sounds like an amazing discussion. Great discussions all around. I'm glad we had extra time in breakouts. Dave, do you want to share what you all talked about?
Sure. We had a smaller group, one with somebody who is fairly new to Safe Routes to School and another that was a wily veteran, and then two of us that don't regularly do walk to school day events. But I would say generally we found that the presentation on the inclusive walk guide both included just good practice for holding a meeting. If you've been holding meetings a long time and some of those things felt new to you, dive in, because they're great for all meetings, inclusive or otherwise. And then we did some back and forth with Michelle was the wily veteran. Sorry, Michelle, to call you out, who's been doing Safe Routes for a long time, and Elizabeth, who is just getting started as a ship coordinator in Chisago. So we just did some tossing back and forth around ideas for using Walk to School Day as a kind of way to get in the door in some of the communities where Elizabeth is working. And then Michelle, I really like this because I think that sometimes we check the box on this, but Michelle, and think we're done. But Michelle was talking about communication around Walk to School Day events and around Safe Routes in general, that you can't presume that because you've put a bunch of posters around a school that the kids have any idea what date Walk to School Day is, or that even if you've done robocalls and sent emails and been on the PTO Facebook page, that they have any idea that Walk to School Day is coming up. And so really working, if your district has a communications person, really working hand in hand to over communicate these events and other Safe Routes to School activities throughout the year to make sure that folks actually know about it, including your Safe Routes to School team, which was the case with some of the folks Elizabeth has been talking to on her first weeks on the job. So, and then can I just plug one thing here, since I think we just have a couple minutes, and that is that just a heads up for those of you that were considering, this fall there's a number of solicitations for funding that'll be open at MnDOT. There's our planning assistance solicitation for Safe Routes to School, as well as our boost solicitation that provides funding for things like bike fleets and racks. This is going to be a shorter solicitation year for Boost. So just to get your head wrapped around it, we want to give as much time in 2023. It's a very short window of time for those grant recipients to be able to spend that funding. And so we're going to wrap that solicitation up at the end of November, whereas in previous years, we would have wrapped it up in early January. So you'll still have 2 months to, you know, get your team together, come up with whatever concepts you might be pitching for your Boost grant. But that final grant will be due November 30th. And that solicitation will open the first week of October. So if you're wanting to get a jump on it, you're welcome to go look through our old Boost materials. They haven't changed that much, but just wanted to make sure that folks were keeping their eye on that.
Thanks, Dave. Alyssa, do you want to give us a super brief report out from your group before we close?
Yes. We talked a bit about the walk audit and how we thought that this could be a good resource in smaller communities where maybe the disability community isn't as obvious or as large. And so making sure that those community members are involved. In terms of walk to school day, we talked a lot about, as Dave's group did, communication, engagement, like how can we share effective communication to get the word out and ensure that people would be engaging with it. So we talked about publicizing, whether it's like flyers, local newspaper, radio, making sure you coordinate with the school. That way they know the comfort level of like the school engaging with other outside community members, doing flyers and offering incentives for during it to keep people engaged. And yeah, it's a very quick rundown.
Awesome. I appreciate it. I wish we had more time to dive into everyone's conversations, but we are going to move towards wrap up because we're gonna run over hopefully no more than 1 minute. I'm going to share my screen again, and Angela is going to talk to us for just a second about the Walk Bike Fund.
Yeah, hey everyone, me again. Alyssa's sharing a slide about our Walk Bike Fun host site application. We've extended the host site application until next Friday, the 12th. One thing to note is we have a brand new curriculum. I actually am in contact with the printer as we speak, so the new curriculum will be ready to go in the fall. If you want to squeeze in another training this August, we can accommodate you that as well. We've got some flexibility for the rest of the summer. But yeah, host application, it's open, pretty simple, walkbikefun.org. I'll put it here in the chat. If you just scroll about a third of the way down the page, you'll see the link to the host site application. And we'll come to you and we'll roll out this brand new curriculum. The curriculum expands. So now we have 12 walking and 12 biking lessons, and they're a lot more tailored towards age and grade. And we've also added in some learn to ride curriculum, which wasn't in the old curriculum. So if you know of your site that has already taken it, this is a great time to retake it because it's brand new. So yeah, that's my plug. Any questions, email me, angela@bikeandmen.org, but we would love to come visit y'all, come visit your school. So spread the word. If you want a copy of this slide, I can send it to you as well. And if someone's like, I can't get it together by August 12th, contact me. That's totally okay. We can have some flexibility with that date. So thanks all.
Thanks, Angela. Super cool, fun stuff happening. A couple other things, just very briefly. The Association of Pedestrian and Bicycle Professionals is having their annual conference in Minnesota in the Twin Cities in just a few weeks. If that's not on your radar, I know there's going to be a fair amount of walking and biking tours, as well as a bunch of walking and biking expertise. So if you want to meet a bunch of people who work on walking and biking stuff, this would be a great place to do it. Safe Routes to School National announced their 2022 summit in November. So save the date for that on your calendars if that's a thing you're interested in exploring. And then last announcement is around our next couple calls. We have some topics here. We're going to be talking about engagement and evaluation, the online, offline hybrid. We talked about a little bit today, actually. A fair amount of folks mentioned grant stuff, including Dave. We're going to be digging into that more deeply in October. And then in November, we're going to be thinking about accessibility and adaptive bicycling in safe routes to school. So digging in even further on that topic. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I hope you have a great rest of your Thursday and look forward to seeing you all next month. Take care.
One.
Hi, everyone. This is an addendum, very fun, to our August 4th Safe Routes to School call. Katie Benziger, a parent at Condon Park Elementary, wasn't able to join us for the call, but has really graciously agreed to share some of her time, her wisdom, and experience working on Walk to School Day events and other Safe Routes to School events at the Condon Park Elementary. As the network is thinking about how we all want to plan Walk to School Day and lessons learned from experienced folks like Katie. So with that, I will let Katie do her presentation. Really excited to hear what she has to share.
Great. Thanks so much for the invitation to share with you. I am a parent just a member of the Condon Park Parent Teacher Association. I have 2 children who are now going to be in 2nd and 4th grade at the school. And my first experience with the Walk to School event was when my son was in kindergarten, pre-pandemic, when we had events, at the school. And it was the first time that I realized that we lived close enough that we could actually walk to school. We live about a mile from our community school, and my kids usually bus, but it was such a great event, and it got to see a lot of our neighbors, and our neighborhood kind of walked sort of as a walking bus, all of us sort of together. And ever since then, I was sort of hooked. And so when the pandemic hit and we weren't doing a lot of these events because the kids were like half hybrid, half at home, and all this stuff, I really tried to bring it back and get these events started again, because I actually, in my real job, am a cardiologist. I'm a preventative cardiologist, and I feel very strongly about people getting exercise, especially kids. We know that obesity and has really gone up during the pandemic in youth and as well as in adults. And so in my opinion, getting the kids to walk gets the parents to walk, which is sort of my hidden agenda for why I got involved in this. So this is a little summary of the events that we've had just really in the last year, but this, our school has been participating in the Walk to School events, I think, for over 10 years. Our principal Kathy Cush-Marshall, has been very active, I think, and supportive of this efforts. And she's been, I think, for as long as she's been there, so 12 or 13 years, we've been participating in Walk to School. A lot of our kids, if you live within a half mile of the school, don't get busing. And so there's a lot of kids who walk or bike on a daily basis. And the Walk to School events, both in October and May, we say you can either, walk or bike. It doesn't, we're kind of indifferent. Here's an example of the bike racks at the event in May of this year. I mean, they were overflowing. We counted 120 bikes at the time that school started. And a lot of parents had come and picked up their kids' bikes, and taken them home. So I think there were, easily 150 kids that had biked, and you can see a lot of parents and things that were there. We have a great school patrol that help at some of there's 3 particularly busy intersections. And it's just great to keep them busy, have people, walking in the schools. So this is, again, Condon Park Elementary. There's 506 kids, grades K through 5. Our diversity index I looked up online is like 0.37, which is less than the state average. Duluth is a largely, Caucasian area. We have 22 staff and teachers. The school day starts at 7:45 in the morning, goes till 2:20. And we, for some of the events, basically have just this year sent out messages on the Condon Park PTA page, as well as emails through. We have every Wednesday, the school sends a newsletter. So you have to send the secretary a message the day before to put it in the school newsletter that goes out to all the parents that, hey, just, next week is Walk to School Day. Give some information, usually a couple bullet points. We'll also send some of the word find games and some of the other activities that you guys put out to some of the teachers if they want to print them and give them out. I always make copies and give them to my kids' classes, but that's something that I think with a little more advanced notice, we could do more of the in-classroom education and teaching about the event, not just have the parent, you need to alert the parents, because the parents have to supervise the kids to come to school, but then actually talking about the safety and and some of the specific things about crossing the street and other things can be discussed, during the morning meeting and things like that in the kids' classroom. We've also done pre-pandemic walking school buses, where the school buses actually stop at the middle school, which is about a mile away. And then all the kids get off the school buses and then they all walk together, so that all of the kids, in the interest of, trying to be more inclusive, the kids that live too far away or who are busing from, some of the lower socioeconomic areas that where their parents can't, or they're working, they can't take their kids, they could still participate in these activities. And this year, you really need about 20 to 25 volunteers. You need 2 parents per bus to manage the line of kids and just supervise them for that walk. And it's been very, very challenging during the pandemic to get volunteers. And we're still trying to figure out why parents aren't volunteering, if everyone's just overwhelmed or doesn't, they're just still kind of coming out of isolation in their bubbles. But we were unable to get enough volunteers to be able to do walking buses, but it's something that we'd like to bring back, which we've done in the past, to make sure that all the kids can participate in the Walk to School event in the fall. This year, I also reached out to Super One Foods, which is our local grocery store, to see if they would donate just, some treats. And they gave us 300 donuts, which is not the heart healthiest thing to eat, but I can tell you all of them were gone. The kids absolutely loved the donuts as a treat for having walked to school. And so you can see that in the bottom left. And that was really a generous donation from our local grocery store. I see sometimes online that people complain about the temperature or the weather or, things for when you guys put on these events. And I always think back that there's no such thing as too cold of weather. There's only inappropriate clothing, and no one kind of can speak to that better than us up here in Duluth. Here is our February winter walk to school event. I can't remember the temperature, but it was probably close to 0. And we, again, had hundreds of kids and families out walking. We actually had a couple of our a school board member and a city council member come to say hi. This is a picture in the middle of the bottom, and hold up little signs saying, yay, walk to school. And really the reason we had invited them, and we always invite them, is so that they can see this problem of the traffic, which you can see in the bottom left, the lineup of cars that this is a very busy road. This is Superior Street. It's the main thoroughfare for the community to get downtown, which is where a lot of people work. And so at this time, this is the school day starts at 7:45. This is probably around 7:30, 7:40. There's a lot of people commuting, and it gets very, very backed up. And so without the school patrol and safety, this is the only stoplight, the only intersection that has a light. And we have a lot of safety concerns at a couple of the other intersections around our school that we've been really trying to advocate with our city of Duluth, as well as, our city council through the PTA and other things. And this is one of our sources of frustration, because it's really hard as a parent to know who is the person who makes these decisions about trying to get a better or additional crossing, for example, up by where the school bus is. A lot of people live down on this end, and for them to walk all the way down to this light and then cross and then go back to the school is a little bit out of the way. Furthermore, many of the houses on this side of the street don't always shovel their sidewalks. And so the sidewalks around the school are always clear, but on this side of the street where a lot of people live and are coming from are often not very, you basically have to walk on the street, and that's even less safe than just, so then they end up crossing down here where there's no crossing. Let's see. Oh, so these are my kids. We just printed off some signs. These are one of my, the parent who I took over from. Her kids are in middle school and high school now. And so they always come down because the middle school starts a little bit later at like 8:30. And so we recruit some of them to come hand out stickers and things. I will say, that our janitors gave us a little bit of grief because a lot of the stickers that said I walked or biked or winter walked to school ended up on the lockers and on the ground, and it took a lot of extra custodial time to clean them up. And so they have kindly requested that we no longer hand out stickers. This is another, some more pictures of the kind of bike to school. This is a couple days after the bike to school in my daughter's kindergarten class. These are, things that they said that they can do. And I thought it was cute that a lot of kids here said, I can ride a bike, here's, I can color, I can read, I can ride a bike, I can ride a bike. And so, being able to get kids out and being active, I think is a really big sense of pride for them, as well as it builds great community to get the neighbors all together and come to school. So here's, again, just some more pictures from our May walk, bike, run. And here we actually had a kid rollerblade and another kid ride a scooter. And then I had made a poster that said, or my daughter actually did, she's in first grade, she made the poster, and then we had all the kids sign it. And then we had some of the zipper pulls and bookmarks and things for kids to take, as well as stickers. And then we hung up the signs in the hallways that, that they got to sign that they walked, and they really liked seeing that. And so I thought that was a fun thing that we did this year. The other thing that we've done as part of this Safe Routes to School, just trying to get people really active, is bring back our bike rodeo. So in the past, there was a person in Duluth who had organized these at the local schools, and they have since, I think due to staffing or COVID and things, they only are doing it in schools, like at the 4th grade level, at a couple schools each year. And so most of the kids are not getting the bike safety education like they had in the past. And so we decided to bring back the bike rodeo, which the last time we had that was in May 2019, before the pandemic. And so I mostly myself, and with the help of Michelle, organized this bike rodeo, and it was unbelievably successful. We had over 250 kids and families and things there. We had a bike raffle where we had bikes donated from the local hardware store. We had about 30 bike locks donated from a local bike shop, as well as water bottles. We had food trucks, some vendors. We had the local fire, police, and ambulance come. It was timed so that we had our PTA book fair inside in the library in the same day. And then we had people donate food, and we collected over 400 pounds of food. And so this was a really, really fantastic event where you could do more of the education and safety. The kids here are in line for the mountain biking course, which was set up in the field. And then in the parking lot of the school was the gym teacher had done the curriculum online for the walk, bike, fun, and set that up. And then we had some volunteers from the local kind of honor society at Duluth East help staff that. And you really do need a lot of volunteers to put on an event like this, but we had a lot of parents and, like I said, some of the high school students come out, and it was, after 2.5 years of not having any community events because of COVID, this was our first, school family thing that we had put on, and we're so excited to do it again next year, because it was just such a success. And I think also kind of ties into the Safe Routes to School. We had some of our elected leaders have a booth, and they could not believe they said they'd never seen a bike rodeo so well attended. And they had some surveys, and they had parents filling out what their concerns were with the Safe Routes to School. But again, we've done this many times, and it seems like nothing really happens. This is just a example of the map and the layout of our school, and where the bike course and the rodeo was. And this is the main intersection that we have a lot of concerns about, as well as there's an intersection just right down here where it's a lot of people are trying to cross, and we would like it to be safer for our kids, and trying to figure out funding. I know that our school district has put in some grants to try to improve school safety, but only one of them was selected, and it was only it's for one of the schools. And so I think that investment in trying to improve infrastructure is really needed. This was a bike bingo that I created for the bike rodeo that just, again, talks about, you know, what are the bike safety things, and then having the kids go around to see all the activities. So I guess kind of in summary, in terms of what we've done and what we need, I think we've, you know, usually we register on the website a day or two before. We get like a packet from you guys that has like a bunch of the stickers and some information. I think getting that farther in advance would be helpful, as well as getting, you know, we have a record of having a lot of kids participate. And so we run out of the giveaway things, like the bookmarks and the zipper pulls are very, very popular. And our custodians would prefer if we did not give out stickers. Usually for the really easy events, I just text a couple of my friends who I know walk every day with their kids. And so it's usually, we just need about 4 or 5 volunteers to stand at a couple of the doors and just kind of hand these things out or congratulate kids for walking, thanking them, being excited. We somehow, somebody accidentally threw away our box of our signs. So we had like 3 of these yard signs, and we had a banner, a plastic banner that Michelle had created that we would hang up on the fence so that people going by would know that this is what's going on today and things. And so getting maybe a grant or some funding to be able to have more of that advertisement for the community and for the school would be really helpful. I have used the press releases for that they had online for the bike rodeos, but having kind of pre-filled, like really easy to use and download press releases to send to the media outlets so that they can cover, as well as kind of the really easy kind of emails, as well as I know you guys have some social media posts that we've put on our PTA social media, I think are super helpful. There were also some signs that were sent in our packet this year that I put up on that was super easy to just put up, you know, on the doors and things for the kids, for the education, because I think that's really important. You know, you need the parents to get the kids there, but then you also want to try to educate the kids about why we're doing this and why it's important. And for me, it's more the health benefits. And then kind of bigger picture, we still need safer routes to school. And I know that's part of this meeting, but it's just, you know, Michelle's older kids are in 9th grade, and she's been doing this since they were like in early elementary. And so it's been about 10 years without any significant improvement in our infrastructure around our school. And so people get really frustrated. Our principal, I think, has become like, oh, I don't, you know, there's nothing we can do. And as parents, you know, year after year, I mean, it's like, is it going to take some kid to die at these intersections for something to actually get done? It's very frustrating, especially when such a large percentage of our school does not get bused and has to walk every day. You know, my kids, you know, will walk most of the days or bike in September into October, a little bit in the winter, and then again in the spring. But, you know, there are kids who absolutely every single day are out there walking. Or, you know, getting dropped off. And there's some major, I see a lot of people very impatient trying to get to work and are not, you know, it can take minutes, 3-5 minutes to get down Superior Street when it usually takes you 10 seconds, right? To when there's cars trying to turn left, when there's buses, when there's kids and families crossing the street. It's dark, you know, most of the winter, kids are crossing the street at those intersections before the sun is up. You know, they're coming, you know, there's not a lot of light. And these are things that are really, it can be very dangerous for kids. And I do worry that it's going to take somebody getting injured until something actually happens. We talked a little bit about collecting data. We've been trying to do that. It's unclear to me where the data is going or how it's being used. So I think continuing to do data collection on how many kids are walking and what parents' opinions are going to be really important. Trying to continue to focus on equity and inclusion and trying to make sure that we are providing this opportunities for all the kids in education, I think is still a really big challenge because we do heavily rely on parents being home and able to do this. Doing the walking buses is great, but it requires like 20 parent volunteers. And, you know, I already have a full-time job and you can only send so many emails. And if people don't sign up, they don't, you know, sign up. And so trying to figure out ways to be able to get to all the kids is important. And then we usually send a mass email. We have sort of a list of people who are our key contacts for the city council, for the school board, to say, hey, we have this event. And then we have a separate list of our like 3 local television stations, and then the 2 kind of newspapers. There's Star Tribune has a Duluth correspondent, and then Duluth News Tribune. And I would say they come to like every other event. Usually you get a little bit of, you get somebody to show up so that you can continue to share this message about safe routes to school. And then it just requires recruiting the next generation, because once your kids are out of the school, you're kind of moved on to other things. And I think that's where you kind of lose momentum. So with that, here's our beautiful city, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Thanks so much, Katie. There was so much in that presentation that I want to have like a really long conversation with you about, but I will limit. I have like a couple of different, I have a couple different questions. Like, it's one thing that's not a question, but a thought that I just feel is really important related to a lot of the things that you're saying, right? Around like, there are limits to what you can do as a single school site and as one person, one parent. And I think that, at the top of today's call is really interesting. Sam Rockwell, my colleague at Move Minnesota, shared a little bit about the statewide multimodal transportation plan, which is this super wonky 20-year planning document and related funding document about, how we, like, what our transportation priorities are as a state. And that stuff, like, that's the ecosystem you're operating in, right? And that stuff is like not your fault, but it is your problem. And it's all of our issue to solve in terms of like shifting the ecosystem of transportation so that we are focused less on car infrastructure and things that allow drivers to go quickly without inconvenience, and things that are actually investing in walking and biking solutions for schools. So just want to name that, like, that's a problem for everyone everywhere. And, so I think some of the systems level work that folks are trying to do to change that ecosystem, really matters for folks like you and your kids to just want to be able to get to school safely. So, I'm, like also thinking about like how much municipal shoveling would benefit, as a thing would benefit your kids in your school. I'm curious, how long have you, I know that there are some folks who do winter walk to school day and some folks who don't. So I'm curious if like how you all decided to do winter walk to school day. Did that just like, you did walk to school day and you're like, of course we would do another one?
We're doing all of them. Yeah, we just participate in all of them. I mean, why not? I mean, we have so many kids that do it anyway. And I think for me, again, it is people need to move more. If we all moved more, we would have less heart disease, there'd be less obesity, less diabetes. Like, why not participate in all of them? And it's really not a lot of work. It's this, once you get started, it's the same thing every time for each event. I will say the bike rodeo was an inordinate amount of work, and like the day before, I was like, God, this is like as much work as I'm planning my wedding. I was like, I'm not sure I want to do that again. But it was so wonderful, and people were so appreciative. And so now looking at like the fall bike, walk to school event, I was like, oh, I got this. This is nothing. It's not, it's nothing compared to the bike rodeo. But it does take a little. It takes a little bit to get started and to get your feet wet. I'm always shocked. I look online like to see what schools are registered, and there's like no other schools in Duluth registered, or sometimes there's been like one school. And I wish we could connect with our other local schools to say, like, I wanted to put out a press release together to say, look, at Lester Park and Condon are participating in this thing. And then I was talking to one of the other parents whose kids go to Lester, and she was saying, oh, I haven't heard anything about it. And so I don't know if they did have one or not, or, like, it's really hit or miss in terms of the communication. I think there's a lot of shared resources we could do together in our same school districts if we could connect, but our PTAs are sort of separate, and everyone's just busy in their own silos. And so trying to figure out just even connecting the names people who register, being like, hey, do you know that this other person in Duluth registered? Do you guys want to try to work together? I mean, we had all these donuts. I was like, there's no way we're going to eat all these donuts, but they finished them up. But I was like, I could bring some over to the other school. Things like that I think would be helpful.
Cool. Yeah. Donuts are joy. I know they're they are good for you in that way. So yeah, the other thing I was going to ask about was the bike rodeo, and just like if you have any thoughts about the process of it. Like the list of stakeholders you shared was felt like a very big list to me. I can, it's like, as you said, vendors at your wedding. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the process of like involving all those stakeholders and how that went.
That was really frustrating because it was something that we had done pre-pandemic. I had attended it. My son was in kindergarten. I was like, this is awesome. He had so much fun. We have so many great mountain biking trails. We're like a gold city. I don't know. We're like, people move here for the mountain biking. And so it just seems like it would be great to have, more of that for the kids. And so there's two, we decided before, we had tried to do both together, where we had some obstacles like little ramps and these little wooden things that kids could go on. And as well as like how to do hand signals, how to start and stop, and kind of that whole curriculum that you guys have. And so we had met early. We had a planning meeting in March with sort of engaged stakeholders. And I basically just sent out a bunch of emails saying, hey, I'm the PTA, like would you be interested? And got about 8 people who are like, yeah, that sounds great. Let's do that. So we had a planning meeting in March, and then the Duluth Devo Mountain Biking Club, which runs at the high school, was like, we'll take over the agility course. And then they were saying it's really much better and safer to do it in the field. And so it was great. So we kind of had 2 separate courses. One was the safety, I would call it kind of a traditional curriculum, which is really geared honestly towards like your kindergarten, first, second graders. The older kids went through it once, but the younger kids go through it over and over. And then all the older kids lined up, for this. So this was where the mountain biking was. And then this is where this is, and the gym teacher did this all himself. I mean, he set that all up. He had, it was kind of they went down, and they came kind of back, and they came down, and then they had to throw bean bags into these buckets at the end. So those were the parts that I honestly had the least to do with. I just got someone else who agreed that they would organize setting that up. Here's the line of the older kids doing the mountain biking. And they went through it over and over. And we just had a couple high school students kind of positioned at each, area just to help kids. And, it was a lot of work, but I think now that we've done it once, it'll be a lot easier next year. And I think we'll have more people, who want to help volunteer and organize it. I wish there are people in the city, and there are people in the Twin Cities who have all of the equipment, and they would not give it to us because I had not gone through the training. And that was really frustrating because like, I'm not going to go through I'm the event planner, but our gym teacher did go through it, but by the time he finished it, it seems like a lot of the stuff's very Twin City centric, and they weren't able to get things up here. There's the YMCA bike fleet, has a bike fleet and had some cones and things, but again, you had to be certified through the YMCA to be able to rent the bike fleet. And so we got one of the local people who work at the bike shop who's done it. She had gone through it a couple of years ago, so she was able to go pick up the bike fleet trailer and sign off on it. But like, I couldn't do it. I mean, and so these are like some of the barriers that were really frustrating when you just want to put on the event, and you have all these like administrative barriers, and then people telling you no. And it was obvious, we ended up pulling it off, but things to consider when you have parent volunteers running these things at most of the schools.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. And certainly like a lot more work to create it all the first go around than it is to repeat it in a future year. But yeah, it sounds like it was magnificent anyway, despite all of that, and hopefully will be easier to implement moving forward. So such a cool event. And thank you so much for all the photos. They are just like, it is so fun to see so much like kids having fun on bikes at school, and like being in community together, especially after the last several years where that has been really hard for a lot of folks. So it's just like giving my heart a little bit of a lift at the end of the day here on Thursday.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for all that you guys do too to help promote this. And I think future directions, even in engaging some of the you know, coordinating with the local employers who have their employee walk to school, bike to not school to work, you know, events and stuff too. It would be great to kind of coordinate all of that together and as best that we can. So yeah,
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us. I'm gonna wrap us up and have Julie stop recording.